if you can heal the land, you can heal yourself, and vice versa. That's the engagement of place that we're working with, and I guess a very simple theory of change. Yeah.
Welcome to The Regeneration Will Be Funded. My name is Matthew Monahan, and in this series, we're exploring the intersections of regenerative finance, technology, and our living planet. Created with Ma Earth, you can find all of our conversations and more at maearth.com. Thanks for joining us. Today's guest is my friend Ness Radich from The Learning Environment. The Learning Environment is this really incredible group of young people going for it, regenerating a farm and building a community land project and education space. They've got terrific momentum and, to me, represent a real model of how people and place can come together. One of the threads in this discussion is around how the learning environment designs its organizational structure, and I think there are some insights can be applied to the Web3 and DAO space. The learning environment balances deep ecological skills with strong organizational and cultural capabilities. We're a proud supporter of the project. It's been amazing to be on the journey with them and learn alongside them. Ness is so clear and impressive. This conversation was recorded in Mangaroa, New Zealand in March 2023. I hope you enjoy it. Ness Radich. Today we are here with Ness Radich. Ness is a coordinator at The Learning Environment. Welcome, Ness.
Thank you.
What is The Learning Environment?
So the Learning Environment is based in Whanganui, which is about 3 hours north of Wellington. And we're growing an educational environment for community-led socio-ecological resilience and well-being, which sounds like a lot as a title, and it is. We're based on land in Whanganui, the ancestors who continue to walk on that place, past, present, and future. Ngā Pairangi, Ngā Roru, continue to shadow us as we listen in deeply to the wisdom they have to share when we're ready to receive that. The land itself is 70 hectares, and all those spaces on the land are opportunities for learning and education. So there's some rolling hills that is regenerating forests. So 20 years ago, it was sheep and cattle, and now it's gorse and early stage native forestry. The rolling hills flow down to a lowlands, to a stream called Tauraroa. And in those lowland areas, we have spaces like a native plant nursery, veggie garden, orchard, things like that. And those all become spaces for learning as well. So,
I mean, it's one of my most favorite projects and farming land ecological education projects in New Zealand, in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And it's been such an honor and privilege to witness kind of some of the journey that you've been on. Can you share more what you mean about this phrase socio-ecological?
Yeah, we're basically just, I think a lot of us get it. Like the connection to land and connection to self are so linked and interwoven. And part of the story that we're trying to weave back together is that everything is interconnected. And the current paradigm that we're working in that society and capitalism and things like that have been holding as a story of separation, removing ourselves from the natural world, removing ourselves from each other, and removing ourselves from ourselves. Mm-hmm. But actually we're exploring that concept of what is it like to bring healing to the land and how that can bring healing to the self as well. And there's so many pathways to move within that. But I guess in essence, it's bringing like some social cohesion as well as reconnecting back to the land and reconnecting back to ourselves.
And part of the story that is so interesting is how you and this group of other fellow coordinators have all come together and how you've landed on this particular plot. And yeah, can you share a bit more about the background and the history?
Yeah. So I guess we kind of like to say it was woven in us from the beginning. We've all been exploring this in different capacities as we move forward. When I say us, it's about 7, 8 people who brought this vision to life. And it started with a group of mates living together in any of their spare time, being like, what's the impact that we need right now in the world? And weaving in their unique skill sets to see what's possible there. So things like a forester, clinical psychologist, permaculturalist, urban planner, dance therapist, community activator, all these different minds who are engaging in we're seeing the struggles in the world and how can we bring forth some hope, actually. It's so easy to get caught up in the pains of everything, but let's create something that's actually going to be meaningful and is our stand towards the world that we want to see. And that's where this kind of was created. The vision of it, the first 3 years of that vision, so we're about 6 years old, I should say, roughly. The first 3 years was just visioning. It's like, who are we? What are we doing? What's the mission? Where are we going? Who are we engaging? And through that visioning was where we got to the place of place-based learning and education, which was a significant moment to get to, of the importance of being in place when we want to reconnect people back to place and ourselves back to place. We're also on this learning journey as well. Also in those 3 years, we talked about organizational design and culture. So all these like really solid foundational webs that allow us to bring this vision to life. And in terms of moving to Whanganui was a serendipitous moment of dreaming for many years, creating a brochure. A lot of us are engaged in permaculture. And one of our team, Dave Hursthouse, went down to the permaculture hui, which was in New Zealand, and he put the brochure out on the table and kind of forgot about it. And in the brochure was a sketch of the vision of what we wanted to create and putting forth those values in that mission. And he was there, and then one of his friends came up to him and took his hand and said, "You have to come with me." And he pulled him across the conference, and Dave was like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on?" And he got taken to a van, and inside the van was an older man who was in tears looking at the brochure and said, "This is the land that we've got, and you need to come and visit us." And this couple was Murray Jones and Melinda Hatherley, and they had gone to this hui, this event, trying to find a group of young people who they could pass their land onto. Also around the philosophy of organic farming and education and permaculture. And so when they met the brochure and met Dave and saw the alignedness there, it was just, a match made, might be the way to put it. And it was incredible with that as well. Like, we didn't have Whanganui on the cards, but as they nurtured us into that environment and introduced us to their community and their people and their place and took us around the land. And then they were going away for 6 months and they needed someone to look after the land. So they invited a couple of our team to live there. So we really got to feel into place and start to build those local relationships and get a sense of, is this where this vision is going to come to life? And that led into lockdown in 2020, and everything kind of went faster and also slowly considered. And through that time, we said, yes, we've got to go forth with that. So,
wow. There's so many different threads that I want to unpack, and I think are really especially interesting lessons or examples for people considering their own community or land projects and so forth. I want to start with that part where you said we arrived at the place-based kind of thesis of what is our impact to have in the world. And you and I have been surrounded by a lot of communities here in Aotearoa who also are trying to make global impact and make global reach. And it takes some degree of trade-off and courage to say, actually, I'm just going to really focus in on this particular place. Can you help me understand that journey and that thinking and feeling?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the vision has come from our own experience as well. And I don't know, for myself, I've been to events and retreats and transformational learning experiences, across the country and across the world. And you have this amazing moment and you're like, yes, this has changed my life. And then you go back into your context and it almost feels like it starts to dwindle away and it loses its essence a little bit. And what we wanted to create with this place-based education is that it doesn't end. This is a lifelong journey with land, with place, with the river, with the stream, with the plants. You plant a tree, which is something we do, and you can go back and visit that tree. And it's like, that's about building our connection to place. Also watching the seasons change. What is the land calling for? How can we unlock our senses and awaken to the world around us and open that lens of viewing the world rather than constantly moving away and trying to keep ourselves distance from that. So, yeah, the place-based element became significant in that regard. In the early stages of visioning, we thought about providing these education opportunities. We're all facilitators, so we've got experience in that anywhere in the country. But then the realization came, actually, it needs to be rooted and grounded, and so that people can feel safe at home and able to engage and learn deeply in that place. And with the global reach, first of all, we're still very new. We're like little babies in the nursery. But we've already got US universities who are coming to visit us as well. And we see this model as something that we hope can go global, a place-based model around the world. And one of our offerings is that we're happy to share our learnings actively with anyone who's wanting to try it out or listen or engage. So we definitely welcome that.
Yeah. It's like by releasing and letting go of maybe the holding on to some sort of broader reach and focusing, we actually can have more of that global impact and that ripple and that wider ripple because there's something that's so magical being created. And I've been to the land a few times and been to a few of the events, and I mean, it's just stunning the heart that is held, the energy. You walk in and you just kind of have a smile on your face and you feel good, and then to see at the last community tree planting day, like the wider community and how buzzy it was, and people, listening to kind of grandmothers and children talk about how grateful they were that this has come into the space, and that, isn't this amazing, and for all of these different reasons. And I'm just like, this is the kind of world that I want to live in. And so you all spent 3 years in the visioning process, and that's not common, right? Like some people might say, well, we took 6 weeks for our pitch deck, and, it's like, and I know some of that was finding the land, and obviously that's a huge part of the decision-making process, but it also seems, and in talking to your colleague Emma, that there was a very deep intention to really take time to cohere a vision before jumping in. And that runs counter to some of my instincts coming from a software background, where it's like, you just launch something, get it up, and get some customer feedback. Just throw something against the wall, rather than this deep planning process. Can you share more about that?
Yeah. I mean, I also find some challenges with that. I'd call like an entrepreneur mindset of like jumping in and running head first and hoping for the best. In terms of the deep-rooted systems change that we want to make, there's only so far you can go with those short 6-week scrums or whatever. But yeah, I guess the visioning and taking the time for it, I feel like there's a philosophy that we've got of like, we're in crisis, go fast, but actually go slow and take your time, and holding that balance and that tension of wanting to make big impact, but needing to be slow and considered and have intent and integrity enables maybe greater potential for that impact to actually happen. And in the latter, there's also relationships, and relationships take time. You could build a great relationship in 6 weeks, but it probably won't be as great as a relationship that's 10 years old. And so that visioning process in those early times to really be like, what is it? What is this vision? And we used a decision-making framework called holistic decision-making. And it kind of uses like holacracy, and you're constantly drilling in, finding themes. So everyone's constantly jamming on ideas of like, what's the impact that needs to happen right now? And I think the fact there was 8 people collectively visioning rather than say like one founder or 2 founders brings so many different minds to the table. And that probably couldn't have happened any quicker, to be honest, with that many people bringing in their thought and experience and intuition and instinct into this. But the visioning of saying, what are we trying to create here? Who do we want to be? How do we want to show up? How do we want to plan? How do we want to organize? How do we want to make decisions? And all of those unique threads had their own layers of massive amounts of dreaming and visioning. So the holistic decision-making framework gets you to write down everything in a big brainstorm and then start to find themes and then put those different ideas into themes and then keep honing in on them and really get the essence of what you're trying to say there.
Nice.
And have strong, active vision statements like, we are, we have integrity. And so you start to, I find for us, we embody it. The work we did around culture and values runs through our mind, our system, our blood now, because it's so woven into who we are. And the beauty of how that's showing up now that we are in place and on the land is that people feel it. There's no wavering of the vision or what we're up to. How it's going to show up is the community-led aspect of it. The vision is like, if you heal the land, you can heal yourself. And how we get there just needs the community input.
I love it. Yeah, and I mean, so again, drawing from a bit of the Silicon Valley context, I remember there being studies that, and venture capitalists kind of sharing that the evidence suggests that more than 2 co-founders, your success rate on projects goes way down because conflicts, sharing power, sharing decision-making, autonomy, speed, all of these things. And so 8 co-founders, you don't even call yourselves co-founders.
No.
And it really is remarkable to see the level of cohesion in that group from the outside. And so can you tell me more about, it seems like it must be integrated in this holistic decision-making types of processes and the go slow and go fast at the same time. And we'll put links in the show notes for all these resources that are being referenced. But yeah, can you share more about how do you work as a team and what are some of the practices and rituals and ways that you've worked through the inevitable conflict and crunchy bits?
Nice. Yeah. Friendship. And I think this thing around like integrity and intent is coming forth now of like, we're showing up for each other as well as this mission. And that's helped us in times of like, no matter what we know, where we're going.
You've got each other's backs.
Got each other's back. Yeah. So that's a good like baseline structure. In those early days, we also spent a lot of time of figuring out decision making and how that's done. Not being afraid of challenging conversations, not shying away from them, not running away from them, but creating a platform for them to be heard and seen and having processes around that. Active feedback that comes from the heart. We both want to see each other succeed and I need to share something with you that feels like a tension that we need to work through. Things like that, which is hard. Like, I'm not making it sound like it's a really easy thing to do, but having those really clear of how we make decisions and the process of it allows us to continue to allow that to emerge, allow the crunchy stuff to emerge and not be scared of it as much as sometimes it's really challenging, of course.
Have there been any moments where, I mean, it wasn't clear that this was going to happen and, like what were how did you get through the harder bits?
Yeah, I don't know if we've got to the stage of like, this isn't going to happen because of the emergent nature of it. I mean, there might be some like internal doubt, but because there's such a collective force
Right.
there, well, that's my sense anyway, and
Yeah.
my lens. Like if it didn't, for example, happen in Whanganui, and that the working with the land there or that relationship didn't flow through as expected, most likely we'd probably just keep searching.
Yeah.
And it might have been another 10 years it came forth. Maybe that shows how dedicated we are. And yeah, some of the challenging times are actually this like wanting to move fast and slow simultaneously, and the absolute commitment to our values and our integrity means that there's a lot of challenging conversations around when those values are tested of how we want to show up. For example, capacity. You know, yes, there's 8 of us, there's now 14 in our team. And this project's huge, 70 hectares of land. We've got so many pests, we've got so many weeds. We want to plant trees, grow food, build infrastructure, and just generally care for the maintenance and well-being of the land, as well as the maintenance and well-being of each other and ourselves. It's massive. And capacity is something that is tested for us. However, we don't want to we want this place to be a representation of our community and of the place, and particularly not being from Whanganui, we wanted to ensure that as we're growing, we're bringing in local people and people of that place. And we could have gone from the pathway of any of our friends around the country who expressed interest and wanted to just come and join the organisation and help us manage this massive land care project. But we didn't want to jeopardise our integrity of building it, that it comes from the community. And already all of us not being initially from Whanganui, we were already out of balance. And so we had to really take the time to build those relationships locally to enable us to grow naturally. And the tension there is so much to do and so much to hold, but the value set there is we need to go slow. And so that's a constant tension and battle that we're working with, but is a beautiful one simultaneously. You know, it's like, as long as we try hard to support the well-being of each other, although that's always an ongoing challenge for anyone. I think anyone can relate to that. But with capacity to grow, but with integrity to place and to the community which we are nested within. Yeah, that's a challenging edge.
Yeah. So 8 of you show up to Whanganui, and none of you were originally from there. And you put this emphasis on building local relationships and how you also coalesced your team as you grew. And I like what you said, like we were already out of balance, so we had to really give this emphasis. I'm curious also how you've approached building relationships with iwi, the Māori people of Whanganui. And I mean, Aotearoa, New Zealand's a bicultural country, and there's a different context here than what people overseas might have, and maybe not, but every place is different. But I'm curious, within the Whanganui context, how have you gone about that? And what are some of the philosophies and principles?
Yeah, I think the big thing is just showing up for the community. Like, we're only as strong as our collective future together. And so one of our aspects of moving there is actually, how do we straight away just give back to that community in place? Most of us got other jobs in the community, so that we were building relationships, showing up to different events, showing up to the local marae, seeing what they need, giving back to them in their spaces, a few of us were part of the coordination for the permaculture hui, the permaculture gathering, which was going to be in Whanganui. So it gave us an opportunity to build those relationships around that lens as well. That didn't go ahead, unfortunately, but the relationships are still strong and nurtured. And taking our time, I think a big thing as well with that is taking our time, but constantly, I think showing up is the best advice that I got of moving there and engaging, and at the moment it's a lot more of bringing people out to the land and creating those opportunities for people to connect to the place, because that's a beautiful thing about working with the land, is it's not about us at all. We're just on the side, facilitating, perhaps coordinating, maybe, but actually the land has its own energy and feel, and that's what brings people in. We're just there nurturing on the side of that. So we're quite lucky in that regard.
Well, I'd love to talk more about what are you doing on the land. And, it sounds like you have so many different things with tree planting and growing food and building classrooms. And how do you organize, prioritize, and also what are the primary initiatives and activities?
Yeah, cool. I'll just add another piece on the
Sure.
Engaging with Māori is us doing our own work before going out and asking for more support and cultural competency and things like that. So we always had monthly or sometimes bi-weekly gatherings where we're exploring about what true relationship with Māori would look like and feel like and be like. And so that allowed us a more solid foundation to show up and exploring those challenging edges together and going really hard, intense conversations together, trying to navigate that space. But I see now, as we are building nice relationships that are supportive, all that work does pay off. And that would also be a lifetime journey of understanding the cultural competency and unraveling the really horrible history of colonization here. Yeah.
Got it. And in terms of the land itself, really, it sounds like you're doing a lot of different things, planting trees, growing food, building classrooms. And how are you organizing and prioritizing, and what are the key initiatives that are currently underway?
Yeah, so we've, as of recently, we've changed our organizational structure to match our impact. So we've got 6 impact teams, and the names of the teams are those impact spaces. So we're an education charity, so I'll start with one of the teams is Empowered Learners. The other one is Flourishing Waterways, which is our kind of environmental care, which is planting trees, weed control, pest control, things like that. And then we've got Holistic Health, which is the bringing well-being into everything that we do. And in the future, we would love to have a holistic health hub on the land, particularly as we have therapists and psychologists who are engaging with us already. We have Thriving Kai. Kai is another word for food, and that's where our veggie garden and orchards sit under. And we're really lucky at the moment that we can give out food for free to our community. So that's an exciting initiative. Then we have Future Resilience, where we kind of put our infrastructure, so constantly sitting with a lens of let's build for the future. Self-sufficiency, as the climate changes, how we creating a place where people can keep coming back to and have the resources to set up, which includes a solar power setup that we recently did as well, which is very exciting. And we have equitable communities. So that's the space around events and bringing people out to the land and ensuring that we're keeping that lens of equity, ensuring that we're keeping our lens of equity in everything that we do. And how we see these 6 impact areas is that they're constantly engaged in each other. So we're in a decentralized organizational structure. Most of us are in multiple teams, and that allows the communication to flow between the different teams without having someone like a CEO or upper level management.
So six impact teams, decentralized in these different impact areas, and what a beautiful way to organize in in kind of direct alignment with the change you're trying to make.
Yeah.
And are there team leads within each of these impact areas? So is there still a notion of hierarchy anywhere in the organization?
Yeah, like we were trying to not have any hierarchy, but it actually worked. It actually turns out there is some value to having some people coordinating. So we've got the concept of a coordinator in each of those teams, but not too much of a hierarchy. What we're trying to do is celebrate each other's unique skill sets and offerings. And some people are naturally good at coordinating and holding that big picture. And some people are naturally good at just like getting out and doing that stuff with skill sets and tasks and expertise. And what we're trying not to see is that one is higher than the other, but they both play the critical role. And that's celebrating each other's gifts that they can offer into a place. So in terms of the teams, yes, we have coordinators and then we have the team. Most of the decisions still run between the whole team. And the coordinator just kind of holds that big picture and maybe steers the journey that they're on. And then we have another team in the forest, which is called the Living Strategy. And you can see we make our team names so that we remember how to live to that philosophy as well. So the strategy is alive. It's a living strategy. And in that one, we kind of hold the whole picture of what's going on, but it's more a sensing in to the organization and the people's needs and where the balance needs to flow. And collectively, we look at what is our strategy for the next 6 months and try and move our energy towards what that is. So coming up, we've got the tree planting season, which is quite a lot of work for us. So we do tree planting on the land and in the region as well. And so it might be, I'm not in the Flourishing Waterways team, but I'll probably go out and plant trees because that's where the energy is needed. So that's how we're constantly like navigating the spaces that we're working in. And although we constantly move between those trees to support the bigger picture of what's happening right now. And I think that's really fun, being in an organization that allows that, not like just in the office.
Yeah, it sounds a lot different than a Halogen Lights office with a hierarchical pyramid enshrined org structure and, very bland corporate titles and, this like fluid, dynamic, impact-oriented, living teams and strategies moving between one another in this kind of holistic way, recognizing that all of the parts are necessary and that everyone has an important gift and set of gifts to contribute. I really think that these kinds of organizational principles are the future. I'm curious with Flourishing Waterways, that seems to really anchor water at the center, and we're talking about tree planting and conservation and invasive species, and so why did you choose Flourishing Waterways as your indicator and the way to describe that area?
Yeah, it's a cool question actually. Basically, everything flows to the stream and to the river. Water is constantly moving through the landscape, and the place that it leads down to is the stream and then out to the Whanganui River. So we're thinking of that whole big picture and seeing it as all interconnected as one. So when you're planting trees, you're supporting the banks to stop, sediment and stuff going into the river, which is supporting the well-being of the river overall. So it's just holding that bigger system perspective rather than conservation as just a concept,
right?
Really.
Right. I mean, to me, it's so much more inspiring to say flourishing waterways than 1.5 degrees, 400 parts per million carbon sequestration. It's like, if we anchoring to carbon as our orientation, how do we reduce our carbon footprint versus anchoring to flourishing waterways? Yeah, I don't know. I just get really excited about that.
Yeah, you can start to feel and imagine what that could be like. Like what is the biodiversity like in a flourishing waterways? How does it feel? What does it look like?
Right.
And so I think that's part of the keeping that vision and everything that we're doing as well.
And it really cultivates that human connection with the land, because in a flourishing waterway, I'm imagining swimming in the water or drinking the water or being outside and playing around the water. And it's like, having the dogs out and like, those types of things come alive more.
Yeah. And I love the like vision of just like thinking about how much water is actually flowing through a landscape. Yes, we see the streams and the rivers, but there's so much we don't see.
Right.
And that is what excites me about that.
Right. And so much of the ecological regenerative work that we need to do on the land has a lot to do with slowing down water and restoring the way that the landscape manages the water and, filtration of water, and how do we, rectify the fact that we've dumped, enormous amounts of chemical loading into the soils and into the waters. So I also want to unpack this notion of holistic health and that connectivity to the environment. A lot of times in the environmental space, there's not necessarily that direct link being emphasized. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think just flowing on the environmental space and the well-being not being emphasized. A few people in our team, particularly Cameron and Leo, have spent a lot of time in that space, years working, planting trees, doing all those things, weed control, pest control, and being out in the natural world. And they saw that there was such a strong disconnect between the people who are supposed to be giving back to the natural world around us and just how bad they're treated or how bad the well-being is of those people, like pushed hard for long days, so much about like numbers rather than actually the connection to what you're doing. So we see that as, mental health and well-being is just like in such a bad place across the world. I think we can all probably acknowledge that. And so just really putting that front and center into everything we do is the way of bringing that holistic health in. One of the aspects that we particularly connect to is embodied holistic health. That's like even like planting trees and using your body. Like, how are you feeling? Are you keeping yourself hydrated? Are you, wearing a sun hat and sunscreen, and are you stretching when you need to stretch? It's not just like getting on the grind to plant the trees to give back, if we're really holding that thread of if you heal the land, you can heal yourself. I'm sure they're not two separate things, and they can happen together with mindfulness and with presence in what that actually means, and keeping holistic health and well-being and mental health constantly there allows us to continue to explore that. Ways that we do that on the land, particularly around that conservation space, is held through metaphor and observing the world around us as you're engaging with it. For example, Cameron is amazing at this, but seeing some of the beautiful kahikatea tree covered in a vine that's starting to suffocate it. And we can look at that and be like, you are the kahikatea tree. What are those vines that in your life that you need to cut back, that are suffocating you and holding you back from your truest potential? And when you look at the process of bringing down some of those vines, like Old Man's Beard, you have to go right to the roots to really release that vine from the full potential of that thriving tree or flourishing tree. So we can bring in those aspects of learning and education and using the metaphors of what we're witnessing in the world to bring forth more clarity and maybe insight on your own personal journey around health and well-being. And then, in the practical of day-to-day, it's looking out for each other, creating those like solid community networks, being able to show up in the way that you actually are. If you're tired and exhausted and not slept well and had a hard time, we'll just be like, rest, listen to your body, Yes, this is important, but actually your wellness is also important. So and all the kind of education and basically anyone engaging in the land, we want to make sure that holistic health and that well-being lens is constantly enabled and welcome. Actually, being able to feel what's happening in your body is welcome. I'm a very emotional person. as I've moved into my soft feminine, I cry all the time. And I'm trying to learn that that can be a gift as well. And that's welcome within my organization, and that's welcome within that place. I'm not holding it in anymore. And that supports me to be well, is that I can be accepted for who I am as someone who has a lot of tears. But that kind of stuff is a way of like just continuing allowing everyone to show up as who they are, whether that's the ecstatic highs of being out there in the forest and doing good mahi, or whether it's the lows and needing some soft time or nature time, or to sit by the stream halfway through work, because that's what's present for you at the moment. But the real dream with the holistic health aspect, and particularly with Sam O'Sullivan, who's a clinical psychologist and part of the team, is creating spaces for therapy out there in the landscape, doing therapy and also weeding the garden, not just like what we're doing here, sitting in front of each other and in a walled environment, and actually allowing the natural world and to be a therapist for us as well, and having people who can nurture that. So we'd love to create a hub where different therapists of different practices can come to the land and use that place as an opportunity to create a more holistic well-being framework for therapy. We also have Julie Crocker, who is a dance movement therapist. So she's already got clients coming out to the land, and it sounds like, I don't know what they do, but it sounds amazing. They're always very happy and glowing afterwards. But bringing those therapy practices out there, as well as weaving it into the everyday. And I hope it doesn't sound like any of this is really easy, because it's not.
No, it doesn't. I saw a really amazing project at Commonweal in California that was doing interesting things around nature therapy as well. And I'm sure there's, a multitude of really interesting experiments happening in the space. But it does feel like, healthcare, mental well-being, these systems are broken, and we need to find new models and to be inspired by nature and to start thinking about our connection with land, and to actually be immersed in the outdoors when we're doing this kind of work. Kind of seems pretty obvious. And so I'm really glad that you're putting down some of the roots and infrastructure and starting to open up that space more, because I'm not sure that it's yet really hit kind of a popularity or mainstream consciousness.
Yeah, and what I'm learning for my own journey is, again, with this thing of like constantly showing up to this place and with the land, is supporting me more and more with my well-being. I do a lot of computer-based work as part of this project, but I know that every Tuesday I'm in the garden, and that is like saving grace sometimes. And that even if there's so much going on and meetings and business stuff and writing strategies or whatever else in the computer world, knowing that no matter what, on Tuesday I'm showing up for that garden, and that's providing me so much health and well-being. And it's probably been like even over, 2 or 3 years is when I'm really starting to recognize how much that's providing that well-being and support. So that's part of me understanding that and learning about that fast, slow approach of like that relationship to land, as much as with people, takes time. And the true beauty and potential and nourishment comes from showing up and also taking that time when you do need it to be out there connecting with that place. And it can be a slow journey, but it's a beautiful one.
I want to think about the people who have a dream to start a land project or a community project, or, leave their corporate job and city and go out into the country and grow their own food. And, practically speaking, are there lessons that have been learned here, observations that could maybe make that journey a bit smoother? Because obviously all of this work is difficult, and it's very local and context specific. But you all started a garden straight away when you got there. You had started a nursery. You're running education programs. What are you learning and kind of thinking about people who might be thinking to do this kind of experience or journey? Do you have any advice?
Do you mean the journey as like the whole big project, or just a different part, the specific
I don't
part
know.
of
I
it?
don't know who's listening. Yeah. So whatever comes alive for you.
Cool. In terms of just starting something, maybe like reconnecting back to the land around where you are, is finding those projects that already exist and supporting them and going in with an open heart and an open mind. It's really interesting with, I guess, like most things, but with land care, a lot of people have, no, this is how it's done, or it's got done like this, and there's so many conflicting views, which is why I say show up with an open heart and an open mind, and whoever is coordinating or leading, just lean into that and allow that to be the journey. Another thing with how we work is active listening and not interrupting each other. And I think that's another good practice of when you're engaging with different people in different tasks, is to give that space to really listen deeply. And I think we also, in those spaces, focus so much on the personal relationship, but actually tuning that energy a little bit more to opening your senses to the land or the activity that you're doing as well. We were really lucky in our team to have lots of people who have that expertise, which is why all those areas got started up, which is, for someone like myself who didn't have those expertise, I think finding those projects and supporting and enabling those different groups who are already doing that work would be like a really cool way to start. If you had some land yourself and you wanted to do something, just start small and know why you're doing it and be empowered by that. So if you did want to start growing some food, think about what food you love and just start with that. You don't need to do anything big. Just start with like reconnecting to a small place in your garden you just love artichokes, just grow artichokes and enjoy that journey and be on that with the plant and with the place and giving back. I think there's probably just heaps of cool things happening, and it's nice to support those and the ones that you feel particularly drawn to, and know that something I constantly remind myself is reaching out to different groups or organizations that you maybe admire can feel like a nervous thing to do and a bit scary. And so have courage and be brave to go forth and start those conversations and go on that pathway that you feel aligned to, that calls you in and that makes you feel alive, because that's the world that we want to move towards.
Beautiful. Let's talk about funding and how
Yay.
do you fundraise for this kind of thing? How do you pay for all of this? These are very difficult businesses, so to speak, to make gardens and nurseries work and to create low-cost educational opportunities and to acquire land and build infrastructure. And you all didn't start from some huge resource base, and so at least not financial resource base. To help take me through that journey.
So the initial, I think what we did start with was maybe everyone putting in $10 a week to help us, keep building this, and maybe buying food to get through some long meetings. But the real kind of, threshold where we reached out and sought that funding was through a crowdfunding campaign, which you were part of, which I'm very grateful for. And that was for our initial crowdfunding campaign, which we sought funds to help purchase the land and not be in debt. Was basically trying to start without being in debt. And important.
Why was that important?
Why was it important?
To not be in debt.
So we actually had a solid starting. I think it would just be so many challenges if we started in a negative, trying to build something up, knowing that we're moving towards a financially sustainable model, but it's going to be a while to get there. And so being in debt would just put us so far behind to even get going.
Got it.
Yeah. just so many challenges of that system.
So you wanted to get kind of a solid footing and not be in debt, and so you ran this crowdfunding campaign.
Yes, and an important thing for us, as I said before, that we weren't from Wanganui, and so it was important for us to not seek funds from Wanganui and saturate that market. And so we sought our relationships that we previously had. So we had a crowdfunding campaign, but it was still very personal. It was emails, phone conversations, coffee dates with people that we already knew who'd been with us on the journey in different places around the country and around the world, and brought them in. And we were, super humbled to raise the money to purchase the land outright. So that was an incredible journey to be on around that. And our other funding since then has been getting local grants. Again, we're trying not to put too much pressure on the Wanganui funding pool. So if we are seeking grants, we normally go for national grants. And if we are doing local grants, we do it in collaboration with a local organisation so that there's a mutual benefit for those collaborators that we're building relationship with. In terms of the other aspect of our revenue streams for the organisation is the small businesses that we run. So with the market garden, we did some veggie boxes and tried to see if that was a sustainable model. And with the Flourishing Waterways team, we've got the native plant nursery, so selling plants out in the area as well, and also planting trees around the region. So it's the kind of like landscape of revenue and funding, although it's always still a tension as well as we grow and still need to set up some basic foundational infrastructure to enable education.
And one comment I would have, or observation I would have about the nuts and bolts of those revenue streams between market garden and tree nurseries that we're seeing in New Zealand across projects like yours and things that we've experimented with and in my conversations with Dave, is that right now bootstrapping a nursery is a lot easier than bootstrapping a sustainable market garden.
Yeah.
And that just has to do with, the demand for the native trees and kind of the amount of labor inputs required versus kind of the amount of human effort in a market garden. And so we need both. We need all of them. But I guess I just offer that to anyone thinking about some of these initiatives and where to kind of be able to get established. At this current moment in time in 2023 in New Zealand, it seems like so far people are having more success bootstrapping through the nursery model.
Yeah, absolutely. And the skills and expertise and nuances of gardening and growing food is there's so much. There's so much to learn in that space and so much expertise. And there is as well in the nursery, but you can kind of go through the rhythms in a larger scale, I guess. Something we should mention in our nursery is that all the seeds that we sow are eco-sourced, so they're either from the land or from old forests close by, and that's important to keep the DNA and genetics of those native species in the region. So at the moment would only sell plants from the nursery to places within the region that uphold that same kind of like bioregional space. And so it wouldn't be a national project for a nursery unless we got seeds from that place and brought them to Wanganui.
Right. Yeah, that's important for the integrity of the ecological health. On the crowdfunding campaign, I mean, you were successful at raising a considerable sum of money to acquire land. And, so what were some of the other ingredients or lessons learned from that initiative? I mean, to me, it stands out that you really approached it based on relationships. And so rather than just the perks and awards or the hype and the promotions and the social media tactics or anything like that, it was really fundraising through relationality, and that you took your time, like you kind of laid down foundations and gave people kind of an understanding of, this is what we're thinking about. Do you have any input on this? This is what we're thinking about launching with. What do you think? And like that kind of back and forth before you ever got to, hey, we're crowdfunding. But that was the work that built trust, that built context, that allowed people in the philanthropic community to kind of talk to one another and say, oh, are you tracking this? And, do you know Ness? And da, 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 da. And so, yeah, but I'm curious if there's other reflections you have about that.
Yeah, the only other thing I'd say, because I think the relationships were a significant part of it, and leaning into those relationships of people who have known us for 10 years, 20 years, and particularly because we had all been moving in these spaces independently, and then this was a collaboration to bring it forth as the Learning Environment project. I would also just say that clarity around the vision and what we were doing probably helped people to lean into it when we were providing those. At that stage, it was like brochures and 10-page documents that were saying, we're taking this seriously. This is real. We'd gone through like a full due diligence of why this land meets the requirements for what we're creating. And this is the vision, and this is the research we've done. And we kind of used, quite a lot of us have used study as a pathway to understanding these landscapes even more, and using that to set up these things like our economic model and our organizational structure and our learning model have all come from going down that academic lens. And so just showing the rigor and consideration and integrity of what we're creating, I think also helped with that campaign. And then leaning into those relationships who have watched us through that journey, parents, family, previous co-workers, bosses, other friends. They were like, yeah, I know, because you've been talking about this for years. And then the next layer of friends from them, of maybe they don't know us, but they know us through a relationship. And it was really special to not put it on social media that we were doing a crowdfunding campaign. We really kept it personal, and that seemed to sit well with us of setting that motion forth. It's a hard thing to do though, crowdfunding.
Yeah, it's so vulnerable to ask for money from the community, and it's it brings up so much. And I think that having sat in more of a funder seat in the nonprofit space, I see the psychological challenge that people have to ask for money, and I really empathize with it. And I've raised money in the past as well, and so and I think that the maturity in which you all approached it was also really confidence inducing. It's like that there was just like this very human, like, this is what we're doing, and like, this is what we need, and this is what we're paying ourselves, and this is it, this is and like, what do you think? Are there resources that you all have that can help? Do you know people that we should talk to? And like, I just think that it was just beautiful exchange. And the other thing that I really noticed was after the campaign was successful, and fortunately, members of the Edmund Hillary Fellowship really got behind this project as well. There were several donors from EHF, and that was really sweet to see these kind of global folks that believed in the vision and were willing to get behind it. You had set up a WhatsApp group, and there was like this ongoing dialogue of updates and acknowledgement and appreciation. And I do think as a donor, sometimes it feels a little bit jolting to get excited about something and then to put funds in, and then it just kind of goes quiet. And you're like, okay, that was what I was there for, and how's it going over there? And it kind of like it's a difficult experience to feel like you were just a commodity in the exchange, and that there's not like an ongoing relationship. And so when you created this WhatsApp group, and then just every once in a while, it's like, look what we're doing today. And you would share a picture, whatever. And you weren't asking for more money. You were just cultivating the relationships and recognizing that, hey, this group of people is also part of our experience and our journey, and we're bringing you along. And then people feel connected to it, and they can feel proud of what they've contributed to. And yeah, so I want to acknowledge all of those soft touches that you've done, because I think it's been an integral part of the persistent success you've had in raising small bits of funding from various sources as well as larger pools of capital. Any thoughts or reflections on all of that?
That's really nice to hear that you're enjoying the group. I guess I'm now reflecting as like, that's 2 years of sending messages in that WhatsApp group.
Right.
Yeah. And we've got a lot of family members in there, which is really sweet.
Yeah. I love seeing your parents chime in.
Lots of emojis come out. Yeah. Yeah, I think that just, learning more and more about this aspect on relationships. And no, it's a pleasure to send messages to this group, and particularly from that fellowship, to say, this is what we're up to, and we are still grateful. And the flow-on effects of those contributions are huge. And something that was special about the crowdfunding campaign is that there wasn't reporting. There was no line by line, this is what we spent it on, or there was no asks, actually. It was just, here you go. And that was so big and generous, but also very trusting for us to be like, yes, we got it, and we are doing that mahi, and we're going to keep it going forth with the integrity and the affirmation that you've given us through this financial contribution, and to be able to continue that relationship and sharing forth the little moments of magic that we're experiencing as the flow-on effect of that is just such a gift for us as well of gratitude. And I've appreciated the funding from Namaste and Biome Trust as well, because you're just trusting us to do the work. And what a relief. And I think the relationship and that we have, and that I have with your team and you have with my team, just enables that to keep being in that way of like, we see what you're doing, we trust you, go forth and do it. And that's what I'd like hope for future funding and philanthropy, is just to build the relationships enough that you can sit in that place of integrity and trust and friendship to fund and gift those resources in a way that's from the heart for the world that we want to see, that you personally feel connected to what you're gifting to. And it's been amazing meeting some of those fellows who we hadn't met until recently, and knowing that, that affirmation of what we're doing is supported both nationally and across the world.
Yeah. Well, I if anyone listening to this interview series, and God bless you for listening. For anyone listening to this interview series, hopefully, I'm not here to pitch and promote a bunch of projects and so forth. And I do have an existing relationship, and we've gotten behind the learning environment in our way. And but I do just really believe in what you're doing. I witness a group of people who, are taking on a huge ambition, and so there's no guarantees at any step in the journey. But this emergent approach, and to continue to follow the signs of what wants to happen, and to prioritize the health of the ecosystems, the health of the community, the health of one another. I think you're bringing a very unique combination of talents and skills that I think will be a tremendous case study for Aotearoa, a tremendous case study for the world, as well as a huge gift to the Wanganui community. So, if anyone is listening on the funder side, I just give this my full endorsement for whatever that's worth, and really encourage people to check it out. I do, before asking, a closing question, I do want to just maybe touch on a bit of the recent initiatives, because I know there's been some very exciting things that just happened. And if you can maybe share a bit about what's been going on the land.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the endorsement. That's awesome. So one thing that we really want to do with education on the land is have these intensives, transformational learning experiences. In the design and visioning of this, we had our kind of target age group, 16 to 24-year-olds, because we know what it's like to be there. You know, you've got the pressure of finishing high school and you've got to come up with career paths and have journeys. You're also going through that, figuring out the challenges of the world around that time. And there's a lot of uncertainty and unknown, and it's a really great time to build those cohesive community networks, get to know yourself more, and really use that time to step forth into who you want to become or how you want to show up in the world, whether it be in work or activities. So recently we ran our first week-long summer camp for young people in that age bracket. And we were lucky enough to get some funding from the Whanganui District Council, Horizons Regional Council, as well as the Whanganui River Enhancement Trust to bring that together, which meant that it was all fully paid scholarships for the 17 young people who attended. One of our charitable purposes is removing the barriers to education, and often that is finances, particularly for the people that we want to offer that education to. So that was amazing to make it fully paid for. It was probably about 9 months in growth before it got to this place where we ran the camp. And it was an opportunity for us to share everything that's happening on the land, but also build these beautiful collaborative partnerships and relationships, particularly with local Māori who we have been building relationship over years to design what this week-long camp is going to be. And that's when we knew the true potential of this is bringing in the kaumātua Jeff Hipango from the local marae, and he wove together the story of the week. So it was nested in a story in itself, which followed the mountains of the area and the traditional stories around that. And we brought in a group, Kitai Education and Culture, and they took all the young people on the river. So they started on the river, connecting into place, and ended on the river as well. And then we brought in some groups who had done sustainability courses with, and they helped to hold the culture throughout the event. So it was a fully co-designed, collaborative, week-long event. And the magic that happened was profound. So everyone stayed on the land together. It was like creating a community for that week-long period. There'd be just one activity during the day about things like the divine feminine, about connecting to the land. They sowed seeds for the future and made a commitment to the natural world. A day on well-being, their own personal well-being, looking at anxieties and traumas and how to show up. A day on their spirit warrior, getting out in the forest and chasing each other around the trees and getting a bit wild, and made a fire and had meat on sticks that they cooked on the fire, so really bringing out that aspect of themselves. And a day of servitude, so how to give back going forth and that cohesion. And each night was by the fire. There was a reflection circle or a craft they could learn. There's lots of art and creativity and painting. And the magic that happened over that time was profound, and we're still very humble and grateful for how these young people and our team and this collective community showed up. And to really, we talked a lot about having transformational learning experiences, but for myself, just witnessing that was phenomenal. And I'm still in the glow of it. There's a lot of the young people showed up anxious, quiet, shy, avoiding eye contact, big jumpers, hats on. That first fire sharing circle was very quiet. And on the last day, we invited, as kind of a reintegration back into community, we invited their family to come to the local marae and them to present back themselves as this new form of themselves. And people were doing some of these traditional Māori practices like karanga, and which is the call, and the kaikororo, the men speaking to the vision of what had been happening and the intention of the gathering in front of their family. There were 70 people there, and these young people stood forth totally in their power, totally in their strengths, totally connected from the community that's behind them, and stood in front of everyone and presented. Some of the quietest people stood and talked about the week in front of everyone, and we were just blown away, and there was a shine in their eye, and their posture had changed. And as in the final reflection circle, we were saying, what are you going to take away from this? And we hear things like self-love and confidence and willingness to try and to step up in my community, or be the light in big cities like Wellington, where it can seem quite dark. So yeah, it was phenomenal to see that and to witness it and to be part of it. And that's the real magic of where we want to go to, is holding these kind of intensives for people to feel at home and feel safe and connected to place enough to really allow the true essence of themselves to emerge. But also, as we say, like nested in that environment where the land is the teacher, and we're there to hold and facilitate the spaces for reflection within that. That's one thing.
It's amazing. And I know there are so many others. Heal the land and heal ourselves, and vice versa. How do people engage with the learning environment? If they're in New Zealand, can they come visit you? If they're overseas, how do they learn more? And any other final words or reflections?
Thank you. So best way to engage would be through our website, www.learningenvironment.nz. We've also got a Facebook and Instagram, which are both Learning Environment NZ, where you can find us. And that's probably the best way to engage. And if you're in the country, then just flick us an email. And I think all those details are on those platforms. We're really happy to bring people out and show them around. And just the warning is that people say they'll come for 20 minutes and stay for 3 hours. So be prepared for a longer journey than you expected. But it's a real gift to be able to share this space. And we really do see this land as a community asset. It's held by the trust. No one is personally benefiting from it, except for the fact that we get to engage in this beautiful landscape. So no mai haere mai, welcome anytime.
Ness, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope you liked that conversation. Ness really emphasized this theme of taking our time, and it's noticeable that philosophy is coupled with just how much the learning environment has accomplished in a relatively short period. Especially if you're in New Zealand, maybe a funder, part of the Edmund Hillary Fellowship community, I would encourage you to go visit the land and consider making a contribution to support the learning environment in their next stage of infrastructure. You can find out more at learningenvironment.nz. There's a link in the show notes. And for more conversations like this one, go to maearth.com. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.